New Year's Eve of 1966 going on 1967 here in Gävle, Sweden, a man named Stig Gavlen is asleep in his bed before he is suddenly startled awake by the sound of his phone ringing. Tired and confused, he makes his way through the house, gets to the phone, lifts the handset to his ear, but before he has time to say anything, a voice on the other end of the line says just 2 words. Stig freezes up, for in those 2 words were contained enough information for him to know that months of meticulous planning, manual labor, and laborious legal proceedings in order to get the right permits had just literally gone up in flames. The man on the other end of the phone was his brother, Jörgen Gavlen, and the 2 words that he said were "Bocken brinner." For the last 2 months, I've been reading books, archived articles, old forum threads, and social media posts. I've gone to the city of Gävle not once, but twice. I've made phone calls, so many phone calls, to journalists, former forensic analysts, sentenced criminals, and many, many others. I've written over 10,000 words and spent over 50 million hours researching, filming, editing, and most of all thinking and attempting to make sense out of my own thoughts and feelings. And it's all because of this one straw goat. Gävlebocken. When I was growing up in the north of Sweden, Gävlebocken was always something that existed in the peripherals during the month of December. The closer it got to Christmas, the stronger his presence grew. As the years went by and I moved from Norrland to Gotland to Norrland to Skåne to Norrland to Gotland to Norrland and finally to Stockholm, where I have now resided for the last 5 or so years, the stronger my fascination with the phenomenon of this goat has grown. What used to be a, hey, isn't this kind of weird, has grown into me, if given the opportunity, going into a long spiel of various goat-related anecdotes and trivia to anyone willing to listen. Have you heard of the Archer Santa attack of 2005? Did you know that one time someone managed to steal it? Yeah, the whole goat. Sometime in December of last year, just around the time when I was getting into streaming on Twitch, I held a stream where we chronologically went through each year of the goat's life up until that point. That stream went on for at least 2.5 hours, and that was just breaking down the history. I didn't even attempt to go into my own thoughts on the matter. What I'm trying to say is that I obviously have an ongoing fascination with this goat, and while I may not be the world's foremost expert on it, I'd like to think that at this point I can be considered decently read up on its history and the lore, I guess. So when I sat down, almost 3 months ago now, to look over the notes of video ideas in my phone looking for subjects for a December video for the channel, my eye stopped at the one just reading, Bockjäveln. But would this be interesting to literally anyone but me? How do I even begin to tell this story? And perhaps most importantly, would it even be possible to tell it before coming to a conclusion on what I even think about this whole thing? Could I manage to untangle the ball of twine that is my morale once and for all? These questions I could not answer, but what I did know was that inside of me a spark had been lit, and that spark, while not burning any goats to the ground, certainly wasn't going to be easily put out, and that I wouldn't be able to satiate the hunger of the flame before I had made something, anything, about the goat. So that's what you're watching. This is sort of a mix between a documentary in the more classical sense and a more introspective stream of consciousness style think piece. It's as much about Gävlebocken, the city and citizens of Gävle, as it is about me. Because of course it is. I'm an aspiring YouTube creator in my late 20s. You expect me to not twist the narrative to somehow surround me? It's a disjointed piece. It's been shot over the course of 2 months and edited over the course of that same stretch of time. There's been rewrites, reshoots, I've found out new information halfway through the process, I've learned that stuff that I've already finished contains factual errors, and perhaps if this wasn't planned as a Christmas video and therefore has a pretty tight deadline, I just rework it, but for what it's worth, I think that this end product that you're currently watching ended up mirroring the process of making it pretty well, and hopefully that allows for you to follow alongside with me on this journey. I am going to attempt to, once and for all, clarify to myself and in extension to anyone watching my stance on Gävlebocken. Now, it's very likely that at this point you're still very confused as to why I'm even talking about this seemingly mundane straw goat, but don't worry, it'll all make sense soon. But before we get into that, I think we should start everything off with some historical context. Let's fucking do this, gamers. Let's go back all the way to the old and boring times, you know, when everything was black and white and decidedly non-epic. As far as historians have been able to figure out in their lame little nerd historian rooms, the modern version of the julbock stems back to the early 1700s. Back then, when Christmas time was upon us, young people from all around Sweden would walk around the different farms and cottages, knocking on doors and performing little songs and dances and theatrical performances in exchange for food, drinks, and or money. All of these earnings would then be gathered up and shared amongst all the participants at a banquet held during mellandagarna. Mellandagarna is the period of time between Christmas, which we celebrate on the 24th, and New Year's Eve. The literal translation of mellandagarna is the in-between days. And if you think that's weird, a lot of you watching have a day during that time called Boxing Day. What the fuck is Boxing Day? So maybe check yourself before attacking me, honey, okay? During this whole going from house to house to get food thing, it would be common for one person of each group to be dressed up as a goat, apparently using a goat mask made out of straw, which, by the way, if you think that sounds terrifying, that's because it absolutely is. Merry Christmas, Jesus Christ. As traditions do, it evolved, and during the 1800s, the upper classes began having one person in every family dress up as the Christmas goat and hand out gifts to everyone else. Remind you of anyone? But I'll have you know that this was before Mr. Claus was on everyone's lips during this time of year, so if you're a fan of this season and this big bearded Coca-Cola salesman, just remember that this is the original Christmas icon. Only 1790s kids will remember. What I'm trying to say is that this goat walked so that this man could ride his sleigh and eat cookies. He doesn't really do that here. I don't know why you think he needs to eat cookies, but it feels very fitting. I could picture him drinking Mountain Dew for you as well. I might have to cut that. From there, it then devolved into some sort of game where you apparently try to hide a straw goat like this somewhere in your friend's house, and if your friend found it, they had to return it to your house without being noticed. I don't know, I'd never heard about this one before researching this video, but it checks out that the wackiest pranks that Swedes could come up with like 200 years ago was basically just giving someone a not so inconvenient item and then be kind of like, hey, what if you also gave this back to me? Wouldn't that be fucking... Hey, it's a prank, bro, don't taste! In the early 1900s, the goat started becoming more of a decoration piece, with the Christmas tree ornament sized and vaguely Boston Terrier sized version being the most popular. But as you probably know, whenever there is a thing, there's always gonna be someone who goes,
what if thing, but big.
And in this case, that person supposedly was Stig Gavlen, with the help of his brother, Jörgen Gavlen. The former being the person picking up the phone and the latter being the one making the call during the introductory hook to this video. Now, observant viewers might have noticed that I slipped a little supposedly in there.
That person supposedly was Stig Gavlen.
And that's because it's been somewhat debated whether or not Stig Gavlen was actually the idea man behind the goat. As a man called Harry Ström has also claimed to have been the one to come up with the idea and then just getting Steve Gavlen to actually execute it or do the dirty business. Some also claim that the idea came from a Inga Ivarsson, whose family owned the Edsby sawmill, who were responsible for creating the world's longest skis and Scandinavia's biggest chair. However, Stig Gavlen apparently worked on those projects, so there's no real way for me to find out, I think. Except maybe in this article from 2014 that apparently has a bit of a scoop on the Harry Ström angle, but this article is behind a paywall that would cost me 149 crowns a month, and listen, if you want me to do solid investigative journalism here, where I dig into every tangentially related, possibly relevant lead that I stumble onto, well, you better pump those Patreon numbers up just a little bit, because I've been struggling with bills lately. So the story of the real idea man or woman behind this fucking goat has been, quite frankly, the least of my concerns. Patreon.com/Jeffy. Anyway, the idea was, as I mentioned, quite simple. In fact, so simple that the conversation, according to Stig himself, essentially went something like, Jörgen, let's build just a big goat. Yeah, okay. And so they did, and this beast was 10 meters high. Sorry for using metrical for all you Americans, that's about 33 feet and nonsensical. And that was supposed to be it, the end of the story. And it would have been a pretty insignificant moment in history, wouldn't you say? An inconsequential art installation, not much of an epic win or even a chicken dinner, but neither a contestant for the Fail Army Top 100 Fails of the Year 1966 compilation. It would have just been a as far as history is concerned. But that's not what happened, because as I stated in the introductory hook to this here YouTube video, that New Year's Eve, someone snook up on the goat and lit it on fire. Snook? They snook? Sneaked? Someone snook up on the goat. So the goat burned to the ground. The next year another goat was built and oh, what's that? Someone burned it again? And then someone did it again. And then someone else. And then another goat got burned. And another one. Another one. Another one. DJ Khaled. Rinse and repeat that with some variations and you've arrived at our current day right here in the year of our Lord 2022/2023/2024/2025/2026, and if you're here any later than 2026 watching this very video, I assume that either I'm dead or you're looking into some of my old videos for more instances of me saying problematic stuff to use in the ongoing cancellation of me, and whichever the case, good riddance. But that's basically it for the cultural backstory of how the goat came to be in the first place, both as a Christmas symbol in Sweden, but also specifically the Gävle Goat. Now, for your consumption convenience, I have, with the help of Wikipedia, Gävle City's website, and various other sources, compiled a comprehensive list chronicling the collapsing, breaking, burnings, and various other fates that the goat has faced throughout the years. This list fully covers every single year between 1966 and the present day, 2022 excluded. However, for digestibility and narrative reasons, I have divided this list into 3 separate sections, respectively covering 1966 to 79, 1980 to 99, and 2000 to 2021. I've spread out these 3 different sections throughout the video because I don't trust your attention span enough to sit through all of it at once. And with that being said, we already know that the first year of its life, the goat was burned on the 31st of December 1966. In 1967, the goat survived. 1968, a fence was installed around the goat, and it survived. That's 2 years in a row. Let's see if that pattern repeats. In 1969, security efforts were intensified even further, this time wrapping the inside of the goat with a layer of chicken wire. On the 31st of December, the goat was burned to the ground. In 1970, a mere 6 hours after the inauguration of the goat, it burned to the ground at the hands of 2 teenagers, both of whom were caught but neither sentenced. A new goat was then constructed, this time for some reason draped in lake reeds rather than straw. This second goat survived, and despite this, the idea of using reeds was seemingly never revisited. 1971, the goat was smashed to pieces. This caused the organization in charge of building it to officially give up. The Natural Science Association of the Vasa School took over and built a smaller goat to replace the original. This smaller one was also smashed to pieces. For 1972, I have no clear sources on exactly what happened, but reportedly the goat collapsed
due to sabotage.
In 1973, a person only referred to as a man born in 1956, which would have made him merely 17 years old at the time of the crime, apparently managed to somehow steal the entire goat, presumably by somehow getting it onto a trailer. He proceeded to place the goat firmly in his backyard, where it stood until the police came and brought it back. He was supposedly sentenced to 2 years in prison. Justice for the goat stealer. In 1974, the goat was burned. In 1975, the goat collapsed on its own accord. 1976, a student drove his Volvo Amazon right into the hind legs of the goat, collapsing it. In 1977, the goat was burned. 1978, kicked to pieces. And do not ask me exactly how they differentiate between kicked to pieces and smashed to pieces. I don't know where they got this information or how they know which part of the body that the perpetrators used to destroy the goat. I'm just going off of the sources that I've been able to find, and they say that it was kicked to pieces. And in 1979, presumably wanting to outdo the goat burner of 1970, who again managed to burn the goat after just 6 hours, someone lit the goat on fire before it was even inaugurated. Following this, a new goat was constructed and subsequently erected. This second goat was said said to be fireproofed, and therefore met its fate by being smashed to pieces. Okay. During the intro monologue thing, I touched upon how I'm kind of internally struggling to rectify my stance on this goat, and I thought I'd try to elaborate on that a little bit, at least to the best of my ability. So, this is the goat. Some people like to burn the goat. A lot of people don't like when these people burn the goat. Some people put a lot of time into building the goat. Many kids love the goat and would prefer if it didn't burn. Many old people also love the goat and would prefer if it didn't burn. But some people think that it's kinda fun when the goat burns. And honestly, I think that's it. That's the whole conundrum that I'm facing. You know how you can sometimes just know that something is like objectively probably wrong or bad, but you still can't help yourself but kind of enjoy it? The ever so shameful enjoyableness of skadeglädje or schadenfreude. To all the Germans watching, I'm sorry, I tried my best. In the movie Punch Drunk Love, there's a scene where Barry Egan and Lena Leonard are in a car. There's some crooks who've been harassing Barry who suddenly hit them and Barry's car spins out of control. And when they stop, Barry looks up to see if Lena is okay and he notices a small stream of blood that's dripping down her face. And it's like, yeah, I know, it's like damsel in distress, man doing violent thing to protect girl. But that's also exactly the thing. That's the point I'm trying to make, because while I do see all those things and while I don't condone violence and yada yada, I cannot for the life of me explain to you just how fucking satisfying it is for me when the otherwise meek and awkward pushover Barry Egan steps out of the car, calmly buttons his suit jacket and proceeds to kick the absolute shit out of like 3 dudes with the help of a tire iron. It's just, oh, it's so good. And the same kind of goes for this goat. It wasn't built to be burned. It's never been legal to burn it. Kids get sad, adults get sad. If you get caught burning it, you're going to face serious criminal charges. And like I stated at the beginning of this video, I don't condone or encourage anyone watching this to go and burn it or do any other crimes. Objectively, I simply cannot categorize it in any other way than a destructive and illegal activity that some people, probably with a slight lack of judgment or with an affinity for kicks, have turned into sort of an unofficial tradition. Yet, each time it burns, I rejoice. I can't help it. I'm not proud over that fact, or at least I don't think that I'm proud of that. I just want to see this goat burn. It's in my nature. It's ingrained in me. It always has been. And I wish I could tell you why, or I wish that I didn't feel that way. Now, to give myself some sense of perspective on this, perhaps in a desperate attempt to steer my mindset in a new direction, to verbally beat some sense into my unreliable but technically functioning 1993 Nissan Terrano of a brain, I decided to call up someone who I knew for a fact would not stand on the same side as me in all of this.
Ja, Becker.
Ja, hallå Leif. Om du skulle kunna tänka dig att börja med att introducera dig vid namn och hur du kom i kontakt med Gävlebocken från första början.
Ja, jag heter Leif Becker. Jag har jobbat inom Gävle kommun i 27 år. De sista åren höll jag på med att bygga Gävlebocken och ansvara för byggnationen av den.
Hur många timmar eller hur mycket tid går in i att bygga bocken?
Ja, och binda mattorna, det är ungefär 3 veckors tid.
Och vet du, i kontrast till den tiden, vet du ungefär hur lång tid det tar för bocken att brinna ner?
Ja, det tar inte lång stund.
Nej.
Det brinner ganska bra om man får lite bensin eller vad det nu är de har att kasta på, så det går ganska fort. Det har nog inte mer än 4-5 minuter så är han helt övertänd, det skulle jag tro.
Har du något första minne från när du upplevde att bocken brann?
Nej, egentligen, det var ju så många gånger han brann, så det var ju inte så många gånger som jag fick riva den. Jag kunde väl känna känslan av att jag tog det personligt egentligen. Jag tyckte det var för jävligt.
Ja.
Och många med mig som var med och byggde. Det var ingen bra stämning på morgonen när vi kom till jobbet och visste att bocken det var ganska tyst i lunchrummet då.
Mm. Talking to Leif, I could tell right away that my cheery and probably somewhat belittling attitude to this whole phenomena is probably grounded in the fact that I don't really have a goat in this race, do I? I mean, I don't have anything to win or lose, regardless of the outcome, regardless of what happens to the goat. I'll be fine and move on with my day, perhaps with a bit more of a spring in my step, but still mostly unaffected. But let's return to this conversation in just a little bit and now do another In 1980, the goat was burned down on the 24th of December. Hey, that's my birthday. In 1981, the goat survives. 1982, it burned on the 13th of December. In 1983, the legs of the goat were somehow destroyed, resulting in the goat collapsing. 1984, burned on the 12th of December. 1985, the goat was enclosed by a 2-meter-high metal fence, while also being guarded by security guards and actual military personnel. This is the year that the 12.5-meter-tall goat got accepted into the Guinness Book of World Records, after which it was burned. 1986, 2 goats were built, one being significantly smaller than the main one, and for future reference, after this point, every year has had 2 goats, the main one and a smaller secondary goat displayed at the Vasa school. The smaller goat should be considered a bonus, but it is not the main attraction. I will mention it for the years where it's relevant, or for the years where I've been able to find out what actually happened to it, as it isn't as well documented as our main boy. And speaking of which, our main boy was burned on the 23rd of December. Hey, that's the day before my birthday. And the perpetrator was caught by local police officer Sven-Olof Sandqvist. Put a pin in that one for later. In 1987, the goat is noted to be particularly well permeated with fireproofing substances. The week before Christmas, however, it burns to the ground. In 1988, the goat survives for the first time in 6 years, which is funny to me because this was also the first year that gamblers were able to bet on the fate of the goat through bookmakers. In 1989, the goat was, for the second time in history now, burned before even being set up. A fund was then organized, and through the financial donations from the citizens of Gävle, a new goat was funded and erected. The second goat was burned in January. In 1990, several volunteering goat watchers stood guard and the goat survived. In 1991, the goat was burned on December 24th. Hey, that's my birthday. 1992, only 8 days after its inauguration, the goat went up in flames. The smaller goat was also burned that very night. The main goat was resurrected and put back in its place, where it naturally was burned yet again. Supposedly, all 3 of these burnings were performed by the same unnamed serial goat burner. 1993, the small goat became the big goat as the Vasa school builders decided to make their goat 16 meters high. This time, their goat was entered into the Guinness Book of World Records, and both of the goats survived. The same goes for 1994, in that both of our quadruped friends survived the season. 1995, the goat was on the 25th of December, hey, burned to the ground where it stood. In 1996, cameras were installed for the first time and the goat survived. In 1997, the goat survived, but barely, as it was reported to have made it out with multiple serious burn injuries. On the 11th of December 1998, there was a major blizzard making its way through and simultaneously wreaking havoc on the city of Gävle, and despite this, the goat was still burned to the ground. And in 1999, only a few hours after its inauguration, the goat met with a fiery fate and thus burned all the way down to the very ground where he stood. Har du personligen vid något tillfälle pratat med eller träffat någon som har bränt bocken?
Nej. Det har jag faktiskt inte gjort.
Om du skulle göra det, vad skulle du säga till...
Ja, ja, jag vet inte. När jag var i det så skulle jag nog säga att det var en jävla dumskalle. Men det har jag har liksom släppt det nu så. Förresten kanske jag skulle säga i dagens läge också om jag träffar någon.
Väcker det mer ilska, irritation eller väcker det mer sorg?
Både och. Sorg för att man har lagt ner själ och hjärta i ett arbete och göra en fin bock. Det är sorgen det. Sen ilskan över att det är någon jävla dumskalle som bränner ner. De förstår ju egentligen inte vad de håller på med. De har ju inte förstått innebörden varför den står där. Det är ju någonting som Gävleborna gläds åt. De flesta gör ju det. Det här är ju egentligen sattyg på hög nivå, va? Det är ju många som tycker att bocken ska brinna för att Gävle blir känt för det. Men det är inte därför den byggs.
Men vissa hade ju också argumenterat för, så som du tidigare var inne på, att den står där för att det är en större tradition att den bränns än att den bara existerar så att säga. Ja. De har ju räknat på det här. Hur mycket Gävle kommun tjänar på det här att den brinner. Det är ju... Ja, okej. De får stå för det. Men jag tycker att den ska stå kvar. Egentligen så tycker jag att jag skulle gå ut på stan och fråga lite folk vad de tycker att bocken brinner. Så får du höra. So that's what I did. I bought a train ticket, booked a hotel, and left my home to go see the goat for the first time in my life. The goat was going to be inaugurated that same day, so I arrived to a Gävle bursting with life. I don't know if that's anything. We're here. But I think it's over that way. Hold on, got the live view thing. Yeah, okay, we're going that way. How cool is this? Look at the arrow pointing where I'm supposed to go. Anyway, maybe I should give some sort of little introduction. We have now arrived in Gävle and we are going to see him, the goat, for the first time. I have actually never seen the goat. I've never been to Gävle. I'm kind of excited to see him. Will he be big? I've actually had a little bit of an anxiety that he was gonna burn before we got there. Which is a conflicting feeling because obviously I wouldn't mind if it burned. Why does it smell like fire? Did you smell that?
Because there's some...
Oh yeah. For a second I was like... Because I think it's just like over here, around the corner or something. Oh yeah. Get a shot of that. He's here. Gotta say, big man. He is big. Wait, hold on. Look at this dog parade.
Oh shit! Oh, adorable.
What if one of the dogs set fire to it? So here's the double fence, and I don't know if you can see that, but that's the little guard room, the little house there, the little red one. One thing that they've changed is that they've moved him this year, so yeah, that's great for audio. So they've actually changed the location of the goat for the first time ever this year. Apparently it's usually on another town square. I think it's like that way or that way. So this is the first time he's here, and that's just because they're doing some sort of construction or something. But yeah, this is you can see all the security measures. The little hut where the guard would be, there's the double fence. I don't know, like, you know, I feel like it's a quite climbable fence. So I've seen on the security or on the webcam that there are security guards kind of walking around the thing, but I don't see one now. So are they not here in daytime? You might want to do it in daytime. I mean, you don't obviously want to do it because I don't condone that, and no crimes are legal as far as I know, but don't be deceived, he might burn the goat. But as much as I'd love to stand around and just talk about this big fella, I was a man on a mission. Leif had said that I should ask the people of Gävle what they think about the goat burnings, and so that's what I was going to do. Ursäkta mig. Skulle du ha tid att svara på en fråga? Nej, don't even have to look me in the eyes. Ursäkta mig. Skulle du ha 1 minut att svara på en fråga? Nej. Of course. Skulle ni ha tid och 1 minut? Okej. Det är klart. Skulle du ha tid att svara på en fråga? 1 minut. Doesn't matter how many times I say 1 minute. I don't think that changes anything. Skulle du säga att du är för eller emot den? Bränningen, det vill säga.
Varken eller, alltså någonstans mitt emellan.
Men det kommer inte hjälpa mig rent statistiskt när jag ska sammanfoga här.
Nej, då säger jag för.
Du är för?
Ja.
So we got one person who is for burning the goat. So where are you from?
I'm from Taiwan.
Oh, cool. That's so cool. What do you know about the goat then?
As I know that this goat is like a tradition of Gävle, and they will be burned every year by different people.
Yeah.
So I know.
Yeah, pretty much. So, but do you know that like the burning of the goat is
Illegal?
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, that it's just like an unofficial
illegal.
tradition.
Yeah.
Should it just be allowed to live, or should people burn it?
I think it's okay to be burned, but not in like a dangerous way, and also not in the first day, because
No, yeah, it's just be up for a little. Okay, well, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you.
Borde den brinna eller borde den få stå kvar?
Den borde få stå kvar. Det är ganska konstigt att det ska brinna varje år. Den ska stå.
Den ska stå.
Den ska inte brinna.
Tror du i en majoritet eller minoritet som en antibrännare?
Minoritet tror jag faktiskt. Ja, de flesta vill att den ska brinna.
Jag är emot.
Ja.
Det är meningslöst att bränna det.
Hallå, TV!
Ja, vill ni vara med?
Ja.
Vad tycker ni om själva bränningen av bocken?
Inte bra.
Inte bra.
det är jättedåligt.
Varför?
För att de har arrangerat så mycket tid för att göra den.
Mm.
Och så kommer någon som är dum och bara bränner den. Det är inte
Ja, och
bra.
den är så himla fin också, och de lägger ner mycket tid och pengar på den.
Är det fler som vill att den brinner eller fler som vill att den står kvar?
Alltså jag tror det är fler som vill stå kvar.
Men ni var inte härifrån?
Nej, det är från Norrköping.
Norrköping. Och vad för er till Gävle?
Bocken.
Det är så?
Ja, jag har alltid velat sett den och innan den brinner ner så tänkte vi.
Lever den upp till hypen?
Ja, det är sådär.
Ja.
Säkerligen.
Är det en kul grej när den brinner ner eller borde den få stå kvar?
Ja, den ska stå kvar. Den ska stå kvar.
Min nästkommande fråga är så här då, och det är sista, sen ska jag släppa er. Om bocken aldrig hade brunnit, tror ni att ni hade varit här?
Ja, det tror jag. Fast det är klart att man har hört talas om Gävle på ett annat sätt, det är klart. Men jag tror jag vill ha sett bocken ändå.
Men hade ni känt till bocken? Är den liksom tillräckligt för att omskriva Sverige över om den inte hade brunnit?
Man läser om bocken varje år.
Ja, men om det... Man kanske inte hade tänkt så mycket på det om den inte brann. Den är ju mera känd för att den brinner, det är klart. Det är ju något som alla har den brunnit, okej.
Nej, men jag tänker så här, varför ska man bränna ner det? Jag förstår inte syftet med det riktigt. Så att jag står på den sidan där vi ändå ska få behålla bocken.
Men du tror alltså att det är fler på låt bocken stå-campet än låt bocken brinna-campet, förstår jag rätt då?
Jag vill ändå tro det.
Mm. Vill du svara på en fråga om bocken?
Ja, jag kommer ihåg den första bocken.
66?
Ja.
Är du för eller emot bränningen?
Ja, det är alltså, gör man det på rätt sätt, som om man har en tanke och en idé bakom.
Okej, så det funkar inte bara att krypa upp och futta på?
Nej.
Då kan man lika gärna skita i det?
Ja, då ska det ska inte vara en full...
That was a wild interaction to have. Yeah, I was kind of taken aback there, and I didn't quite know what to say. I only said like,
Jesus, det här ska ju ut, vet du, det här nu.
I was like, Jesus, dude, this is going out. He's like, I stand by it.
Jag står för det.
And I'm like, okay, good. I'll fucking have you. I'll keep it in the video. What the fuck? Discounting that last interaction, seeing how that's hopefully non-representative of the citizens of Gävle in general, I honestly have to say that the conversations I had with the people on the streets didn't shine much light on where Gävle seems to stand in this. There definitely does seem to be a divide. It felt just as likely that someone would swing to one camp or the other before they had opened their mouth, so in short, I have to say that my results from this were inconclusive. After this, we went to the inauguration of the Goat, which I won't really linger on, not a lot to say about it, but I will say this. It is a little bit odd to me to see invited celebrities up on stage and the host just joking about the burning of the goat as if it's this silly little goof that sometimes happens. But the second it actually burns, there's a very different song being sung by the same people. That being said, remember a while back in the video when I said to put a pin in something? And the perpetrator was caught by local police officer Sven-Olof Sandqvist. Put a pin in that one. Well, here's that pin.
Ja, jag heter Sven-Olof Sandqvist och är före detta polis/kriminaltekniker. Jag har tjänstgjort huvuddelen av min tid i polismyndigheten i Gävle. Det är klart att man som ung grabb fick nernoterat att bocken hade brunnit. Det var ju en sensationsupplevelse för de flesta Gävlebor, tror jag. Det uppstod ju en debatt, kan man säga, för och emot, om man skulle brinna före jul eller inte, och vilket är rätt märkligt. Men det är ju ett litet minnesmärke för Gävle också. Den är ju känd över världen, kan man säga. Det är ju ett brott, så är man polis, då vill man inte att... Men som privatperson är det samma sak. Man tycker att det är ju en prydnad för stan och har ju gjort Gävle lite mer känt i världen, så att då tycker jag att han ska få vara i fred allt.
Men skulle du inte hålla med om att brännandet av bocken är det som har gjort bocken till ett så pass stort fenomen som det är?
I mångt och mycket så är det naturligtvis den delen som har medialt kommer att prägla debatten kring den. Men att han blir bränd, det är en sak. Att den pryder Gävle och är världens största, det är väl kanske det som jag skulle vilja fokusera på.
I'm hopping in here to explain something that would take too long to kind of cut together and get into context. While speaking to Sven-Olof, I learned that he in fact did not arrest the burner of 86, despite several news sources claiming that he did. He was, however, in charge of the investigation into the burner of 86. Here's a slight spoiler, this isn't the only historically incorrect fact in this video, but I've attempted to correct all my errors in a later segment that I, in my script, just call corrections and addendums. But for now, back to seeing if Sven-Olof can manage to get my goat conundrum under control.
Också, så att det skulle vara svårare att få eld på den, men det har man ju lyckats med varje gång. Det är väl något år som man har stått och det uppstår ju en debatt. Man tycker, huvuddelen av folket tycker väl att han ska få stå kvar och pryda Gävle och bli nedmonterad i laga ordning.
Tror du att det är en majoritet som tycker att han ska stå?
Det tror jag faktiskt.
Mm.
Jag tror nog att folk i största allmänhet, fast det förekommer vadslagning och det ena med andra, så man vet ju aldrig.
Jag förstår argumentet i att den stora liksom traditionen och det som har gjort den till en så pass stor ikon har mycket att göra med att den har brunnit så många gånger.
Så kan det nog definitivt vara, men ser man till det allmänmänskliga så tycker väl jag ändå att man pryder en tingest för att lyfta julstämningen på Söder i Gävle, så är det väl meningen att inte någon ska sätta eld på den egentligen, men ska man få elda upp någonting bara för att man tycker så, men nej, men jag håller väl inte med om det, utan jag tycker väl att ställer man upp den här som en julprydnad, då tycker jag att man ska få vara i fred.
From talking to Sven-Olof now and Leif earlier, I was again reminded that I don't really have a goat in this race, but this time it got me thinking that might not be a disadvantage. In fact, perhaps it allows me to see this whole debate a little bit more clearly, untainted by personal bias due to sunk cost fallacies or parasocial relationships to inanimate objects or whatever it might be. I don't know. I just kind of had this realization that there seems to be stronger emotions at play in this debate than what I had first imagined. In their voices I hear passion, dedications, and rock-solid convictions of the rights and wrongs of this moral dilemma. And that's something that I just can't quite relate to. And is that because I'm drawn more to the side of the pro-burners, or is that because I'm simply not emotionally involved and therefore have the ability to judge the situation somewhat objectively? Again, I don't know, and I also can't help but question whether or not there might be something wrong with me. Am I a sociopath? Am I devoid of morals, incapable of compassion for this work of art, this innocent, inanimate animal? Having almost exhausted my choices of who to turn to next, I decided that I needed to talk to someone who is both disconnected from Sven-Olof and Leif, but that also, at least in some way, share my point of view to some degree. Someone to give me a contrasting viewpoint, because after all, this wouldn't be a fair piece if I didn't allow both sides to kind of speak for themselves, right? But who could I possibly turn to that is as far removed as possible from these two men?
Ja, mitt namn är... Jag är 1 år gammal och brände jag bocken.
But before we listen to that conversation, there's still one last stretch of history that I think we should get through. In the year 2000, the goat was burned just a few days before the arrival of the new year. 2001, the goat was burned on December the 23rd. Hey, that's the day before my birthday. By an American tourist by the name of Lawrence Jones. Jones is a self-proclaimed writer and artist and was visiting Sweden to be a guest lecturer at the University of Gävle. His Swedish colleagues explained to him how the goat had burned almost every year since its inauguration in 1966, and that it was, quote,
sort of a tradition,
unquote. Jones initially thought that this sounded bizarre, but also had no reason to doubt his colleagues and gazed up upon the goat before they kept on walking. He apparently kept thinking to himself that if the goat were to be burned while he was in Gävle and no one was caught for it, he could falsely claim that he was the one who did it. Here's a quote from an open letter that he wrote to the Swedish news publication Aftonbladet in 2003.
Om det inte var jag som tände på skulle det inte finnas någon bevisning som kunde binda mig vid brottet. Men jag skulle ha en bra anekdot till min bok.
End quote. As Jones was walking back to his hotel from the restaurant after having consuming, and I quote,
1 whiskey, 2 beers, and 3 painkillers,
unquote, he once again passed the goat, and this time stopped to admire its beauty. It was there that he was then hit by the realization that if the goat in fact doesn't burn this year, he won't be able to use his dirty lie of being the one who did it for clout. Thus, a plan took shape in the head of Lawrence Jones. He promptly climbed the fence and walked up to the goat and pulled a straw from the goat's leg. The end of the straw still attached to the goat, he pulled a lighter out from his pocket and, again, this is all according to Jones himself, he burnt the end of the straw with the intention of only burning that singular straw and then quickly put it out. He did this so that he'd be able to get away on a technicality. See, if he claimed to have burned the Gävle Goat in 2001 and he in fact had burned a singular straw from it, he technically wouldn't be lying. However, as you can probably guess, the whole goat quickly caught fire. Jones was almost immediately tackled to the ground by an eyewitness, and according to the aforementioned open letter from Jones, he feared being killed by the angry mob who quickly gathered around him. But he was soon saved by the local police, who gladly gave Jones a ride to the warmth and safety of the cell where he would spend the next 17 days. He was later fined with 100,000 crowns, a sum of money that he to this day has not paid, as he upon his release got on the first available plane back to America. I reached out to Lawrence Jones for this video, but have yet to receive a reply. In 2002, former Swedish media personality and later full-time professional racist Gert Fylking supposedly guarded the goat, though I have no source on how long he did that or what it entailed for him to do that. It's a whole month. But regardless, the goat ended up surviving. In 2003, the 12th of December, the goat burned. A replacement goat was erected 1 week later, and this goat survived. 2004. At this point in time, Gävle City had installed cameras that could, and still can, be accessed on their website for a glorious 240p 1 frame per minute view of the goat. There's a link in the description if you want to check that out. Who knows, perhaps you'll
catch the burner.
However, on the 21st of December, the date usually displayed in the corner of the camera view was suddenly joined by the phrase
Burn Bockjäveln,
accompanied by the camera conveniently freezing up for a short while. When the camera eventually came back on, the goat had been burned to the ground. At least that's how the story usually goes. In reality, it wasn't quite the Ocean's 11 heist that it is made up to be. The text message actually happened on Saturday, the 27th of November, and the burning happened on the 21st of December. I think people tend to mix this story up with the DDoS attack of 2009, but we'll get to that one in due time. On Saturday, December the 3rd of 2005, at 9:07 p.m., the peaceful evening silence of the Gävle town square was broken by the unmistakable sound of an arrow cutting through the crisp December air. The tip of the arrow, wrapped in some unnamed flammable material, gracefully painted a tangerine arc against the black winter sky before expertly burrowing itself into the back of the unsuspecting goat, who quickly went up in flames. The two perpetrators, who, according to witnesses, were dressed to impersonate two beloved icons of the Western Christmas traditions, namely Santa Claus and a gingerbread man, respectively, quickly disappeared from the scene without leaving a single trace. In 2006, an attempt at the goat's life on the 15th of December left it with mild fire damage, but ultimately alive. In 2007, the goat is, again, noted to be especially well permeated with fireproof substances. It survives. In 2008, following the aforementioned success of last year's fireproofing and subsequent non-burning of the goat, the city of Gävle, in a move that surprises absolutely no one, decides to not fireproof the goat at all. As a result of this, following a failed attempt on December the 26th, the goat is successfully burned on the 27th of December. In 2009, at 3:50 a.m. on the 23rd of December, hey, that's the day before my birthday, the Gävle City website was exposed to a DDoS attack, which caused the surveillance cameras watching over the goat to freeze up. When the image finally returned, the goat had been burned to the ground and police were already on the scene.
No one was caught.
In 2010, Gävle City officially instituted a brigade of guards around the goat, 24 hours of the day, 7 days a week. One guard reported having spoken to a, quote, mysterious German-speaking man who was, quote, perversely interested in the goat, unquote. Another guard reported that two men approached him and offered him 50,000 crowns cash to turn a blind eye and leave his post for 5 minutes, as they were planning to kidnap the goat using a helicopter and bring it to Stockholm. And listen, I might think that the guy should burn, but no one deserves that fate.
Leave the goat in Gävle.
Yet another guard reported that he was approached by a sweet old lady in her 80s who graciously offered the presumably overworked and exhausted security guard a homemade sandwich and some hot chocolate. Just as he was about to accept the offer, a man jumped the fence behind him and rushed towards the goat. The guard stopped him before he could do any damage, but to this day the question lingers of what the intentions of this old lady actually was. In the end, the goat survived. Taxpayer money
well spent.
In 2011, Gävle City devised a genius plan to keep the burners at bay. They were to spray the goat with water, which would effectively turn it into a giant ice popsicle. Unfortunately, the temperature never went below freezing, and on the 2nd of December, the goat was burned to the ground. This burning was claimed by a group of people calling themselves Fragglarna. Fragglarna is supposedly a group of young men from Stockholm. They were never caught, but happily posted about the experience on the Swedish website Flashback Forum. They later commemorated the burning by getting matching tattoos. On Flashback Forum, many critics doubted their story, and most people simply didn't believe that they were the ones who burnt the goat. In 2012, 2 men were spotted pouring gasoline on the goat's legs on December the 2nd, but upon being spotted by a passerby, they fled the scene before having time to finish the job. On the 12th of December, the goat was burned, the fire starting in the legs where the gasoline was previously poured. In a twist turn of events, this burning was also claimed by the group Fragglarna, who this time wanted to prove that they, without a doubt, burned the goat. So they posted in Flashback Forum once again, first claiming that it's been done and promising a video of the heist, and later delivering that video. I reached out for Fragglarna for this video, but received no reply. In 2013, Gävle City got a hold of a brand new type of fire-proofing impregnation substances, consisting of, quote, natural salts and water, unquote. The goat was burned on 4 AM on the 21st of December. 2014, the city moved a local taxi parking spot closer to the goats, leaving the fate of their beloved icons in the unpaid hands of the involuntary goat-watching taxi drivers. The goat survived, but 3 people at 3 separate occasions were caught by guards attempting to climb the fence. In 2015, the goat was burned on the 27th of December by a 25-year-old man who quickly got caught and after spending a night in jail, confessed to his supposed crime. He was subsequently charged with a fine of 80,000 crowns. 2016, security efforts were raised yet again, this time by installing a, quote,
intelligent camera system,
unquote, which would notify a team of guards as soon as anything moved within the enclosure of the goat. It was burned on the 27th of November, mere hours after its inauguration. The 21-year-old responsible eventually got caught on behalf of a dropped hat at the scene of the crime that the forensic team of the local police department were able to DNA match against the suspect, and he was subsequently charged with a fine of 100,000 crowns. Again, taxpayer money
well spent.
The smaller goat was then put in the place of the larger goat, and this smaller one was, for the second time in history, hit by a car. Now, after 2016 begins what I choose to refer to as the dark period. Keen-eyed viewers might have noticed that thus far the goat has never been spared for more than 2 years in a row since its original inauguration in 1956. But that is unfortunately about to change. 2017. Gävle City goes from installing 1 fence to 2. The guards and camera surveillance remains, and so does the goat. And children all over the country weep into their bowl of Christmas porridge, for they do not know why, but this Christmas simply does not feel the same as previous years. 2018. Double fenced, guarded, camera surveilled, and watched by the eyes of the still unpaid for their newfound duty of goat-watching taxi drivers. The goat survives. The Gävle Goat Twitter account, yes, that is a thing that exists, mentions 2 attempted burnings. Children ask their parents when Christmas will be over. 2019, the goat spitefully lives, thus shattering the previous record of never standing for more than 2 years in a row. The smaller goat is partly burned, but not even this could comfort the millions of children who on the morning of Christmas Day with tear-filled eyes asked their parents, why can't I remember the name of the season? 2020, the inauguration of the goat was held digitally due to a much debated and very talked about virus going around. Despite the lack of people surrounding the goat at most times, it survives the season. Christmas is officially renamed
Sadness Day.
2021. During the deep dark night of December the 12th, specifically at 2:32 AM, the police receives a phone call. The goat was on fire. However, this call was regarding the smaller goat, and by the time that the police got there, they managed to put the fire out before it had spread to even half the goat. The main goat still stood untouched. That is, until 4 days later on the 17th of December when another call comes in, this time at around 3:35 a.m. And this time it wasn't about our smaller, insignificant friend. No, this time it was about our main boy. The spell was broken. And for those lucky enough to be there, they could witness the ghost stand ablaze yet again, for the first time in 4 years. A man in his 40s was arrested and was later fined with 109,000 crowns, but can you really put a price on magic?
Om vi börjar liksom innan bocken brann. Vill du berätta lite kort, hur såg ditt liv ut? Vad gjorde du om dagarna?
Ja, på den tiden var jag student. Levde väl ganska roligt liv, mycket sus och dus, mycket kompisar, mycket som hände. Bodde i en annan stad än Gävle. Var hemma där i mellandagarna och var ute och hemvända kväll helt enkelt.
Men okej, om vi ska ta oss till den kvällen då. Från ditt perspektiv, hur såg kvällen ut?
Jo, nej, men det hade varit... jag var hemma i Gävle över julhelgen. Skulle träffa kompisar. Det var Brynäs-match. Som sagt, det är mycket fest under mellandagarna och julhelgen generellt. Och ja, stämningen var på topp. Brynäs vann, vill jag minnas. Kvällen fortsatte in på småtimmarna. Krogrunda nere på byn. Efterfest. Och det var där någonstans idén kläcktes.
Vad tror du idén grundade sig i för dig?
Nej, men man kommer från stan och där bocken står väldigt centralt, så det påminner en hela tiden. Och det var väl någonstans där när man var på väg hem med kompisarna som det stod där upplyst och man var i gasen och glad i hatten.
Aha.
Det var inget överlagt sådär, utan men man har alltid följt bockens öde och ja, just den kvällen stod väl stjärnorna rätt så att säga.
Drar du liksom, nu gör vi det hörni, kortet eller vad är nästa steg för att få planen i rullning?
Jo, det blev lite tjat sådär på kompisarna att nu smäller vi till, det är helt folkdött liksom, och det var i oddsen, det känns som att de flesta brukar klara det där. Vi gick upp på efterfest, satt och snackade. Jag kunde inte riktigt släppa den där idén. Kändes som att det var ikväll som det gällde. Nu eller aldrig. Jag har väl alltid varit en sån som gillar kickar, så adrenalin, upptåg. Så jag bestämde mig helt enkelt att jag går hem, hämtar det jag behöver och bara kör helt enkelt.
Och vad var det du behövde? Vad plockade du för grejer? Vad var liksom arsenalen?
Ja, det blev tändvätska och en tändare.
Och sen smög du själv då?
Yes. Klockan var tidigt på morgonen eller sent på natten innan man vill se det. Jag hade tänkt ut en liten väg innan hur jag skulle kunna skrida till verket utan att bli upptäckt. Och där stod jag väl och spejade ett tag bakom ett stort träd för att se om det var någon folkrörelse. Och när jag tyckte det såg ut att vara grönt så smög jag fram, klättrade över gärdsgården och flyttade på helt enkelt. Själva antändningen och själva bocken tog ju fyr väldigt bra, men så gjorde jag även min mudd på jackan.
Ja.
När jag stod still liksom flammade det upp över ansiktet och släppte ögonfransarna och luggen. Jag springer tillbaks och står och tittar på om det tar sig.
Så du står ändå kvar lite grann och beskådar ditt verk?
Ja, några sekunder sådär. Ja, det blir som en explosion, den där halmen. Det tar ju sig snabbt. Jag ser en bil som svänger upp på en tvärgata. Då tänker jag nu är det dags att skynda hem helt enkelt, så jag lägger benen på ryggen. Och då tycks jag höra steg bakom mig, så jag har liksom fått jag helt enkelt. Så jag tar vägen ner längs ån. En liten cykelväg som går mellan ån och slottet. Springer allt vad jag har. En annan man eller kvinna som springer efter. Och vid den tiden, när jag kommer förbi slottet, så så ser jag upp på parallellgatan, Hamiltongatan, på fasaderna hur blåljuset börjar blinka. Springer ut upp mot Lutherplan kan det heta kanske. Då har jag ju en person i ryggen. Polisen svänger in vid Gammelbron. Börjar bli inboxad så att säga. Energin börjar väl ta slut. Det är ändå några 100 meter som jag dragit fullt löp på. Och har inte något val egentligen, så det är bara att ge upp. Gå fram till poliserna och de förstod ju ganska snabbt vad klockan var slagen.
During the research part of this whole project, I actually got all of the official court and police documents for this entire case, so I thought I'd go ahead and give you the other side of this story, i.e. the police's perspective on the same sequence of events that we just heard. It's pretty short, and I've gone ahead and translated it into English for you, so here goes. Patrol arrives at the scene. The goat is at that time burning at full force, and amber glowing goat parts rain down on the streets towards the Terrassen restaurant. I love that. Goat parts are raining down. Officer number 1 receives information from the public that the perpetrator is running along the river. The patrol immediately drives straight ahead on Hamilton Street and turns down towards Gammelbron. Suddenly a man comes running around the corner of Länsstyrelsen and runs straight into the officers. The man says, "I heard that someone set fire to the goat." When asked why he's running, he replies, "I thought I was being chased." The man holds a lighter in one hand. The man refuses to say who he is. In one jacket pocket is a blue knitted balaclava. In the other pocket is a rolled up newspaper. The man has another lighter in his pocket. The man has no cigarettes with him. The man has burned half his bangs off, his eyebrows are melted, and his face is sooty. He smells strongly of burnt hair. The man has a wet spot on the left side of his chest that smells like a flammable liquid, possibly gasoline. The inside of the man's jacket is burnt, and the fabric has melted and stuck to his sweater. The man is arrested on suspicion of arson. And that's about it. He was then taken to the station where he was photographed and also had his blood alcohol levels taken, which, if I understand correctly, were at 1.5 promille, which I believe translates to a blood alcohol level of 0.15, but someone else can correct that down in the comments. I usually get those sort of translations wrong. And yeah. We will continue our conversation with the goat burner in just a little bit, but first let's do some quick housekeeping. I just got out of the shower. I couldn't figure out how to get the video back here to loop, so if it just stops, that's why. So while I was researching and writing the 3 history segments of this video, I tried to refer to as many sources as possible. However, some years were harder than others to find anything about, and that's why I was hoping to find some stuff in this book. I don't know how well you can see that, but this is a book called Som jag minns, written by Stig Gavlen. Yes, that Stig Gavlen, the original goat builder, as far as we're concerned. Unfortunately, this book is out of print, but as you can see, I managed to track a copy down, but the seller got sick with COVID, so I had to wait until I could receive it, and I had to shoot those, and I'm not about to reshoot them. So anyway, once it arrived, I realized it has quite a bit more information than I thought it would, which is great. But not so great because I already shot those parts. So in this little segment that I'm gonna try to make as quick as possible, we're just gonna do some quick corrections on stuff I said before and also some addendums. The information is obviously all in this book, but I'm just gonna place it there because I've written it into my phone as well. For the year 1971, Stig notes that the smaller goat was only 1.5 meters tall, and that's important because in 1976, that was the year that a student allegedly drove a Volvo Amazon into the goat. Turns out that story isn't quite true, or at least it didn't quite play out in the way that all the sources online say that it happened, because in 1976 there was no big goat, there was only the small goat, 1.5 meters tall, and that's the goat that got hit by a car, which makes a lot more sense because that thing can be hit by a car and collapse. To collapse the big goat with a car you'd have to go pretty fast. In 1985, it was the smaller goat, which at this point was a bigger goat, who got accepted into Guinness, not the original goat. However, Stig also notes that the Vasa school goat was the ugliest goat the world has ever seen that year, and he likens it to a giraffe. In 86, 87, and 88, the goat was actually built by new people for the first time. I've deliberately avoided going into details about who builds it. I've just said that it's Gävle city. In actuality, it hasn't always been the city of Gävle that builds it. For a good while, it was the fire department, and for quite a bit, there was a group of merchants who built it. And I also want to quote Stig Gavlen from the book. He says, "Enligt min brorsa var dessa så kallade bockar riktiga missfoster med dåliga proportioner och löst hängande halm." That's harsh criticism. In 89, when they accepted donations for a fund to rebuild the goat, they collected 27,000 crowns. In 91, the goat had a sleigh that had product placement on it. Afterwards, there was a vote in the newspaper on whether or not to keep the sleigh or remove it, and the results were 54% wanted to get rid of the sleigh, 27% said keep the sleigh, and 19% said I don't know. For 92, first of all, Stig confirms that it was the same guy who burned 2 big goats and 1 small goat. That's insane. What I failed to mention, however, is that after that, they built even a 3rd goat. This one survived, but not only that, it was taken to Stockholm, where it got to go on a raft and sail around on the ocean for some reason. In 95, a Norwegian man was spotted on the inside of the perimeter of the goat, just carrying several cans of gasoline. They caught him and he just said, "I never intended to burn the goat," but they sentenced him anyway. In 96, other than the webcam being installed for the first time, the goat also got a new design on its beard. In 97, that was the year that the goat got out with multiple burn injuries. Those were apparently intentional, as in there were a group of people who were like shooting fireworks at it, and they got caught. It was 2 guys and a girl, and I think that's the one and only time a girl has been involved in burning it, from everything I can find at least. Even though it technically didn't burn, but they tried. Also in 97, when it came time to take the goat down, the frame was in such a bad shape that they decided they would have to build a new one for the next year anyway, so why not burn it officially for the only time in history? So they did, and the person who lit it was Stig Gavlen. And he was very conflicted about this, but he did it, or at least he attempted to do it. Apparently it didn't want to catch fire, so it mostly just smoked, and it took them like hours, and I think that's ironic and kind of funny. I think they eventually managed to burn it down though. This means that there were 4 burnings in that year. It's wild. Okay. In 99, I forgot to mention that after the original goat was burned, they built a replacement one that survived. Also, I realized just now that I didn't put on the fucking sweater. Jesus Christ. Well, I'm not gonna reshoot that first half, so I'll just have to live with it. Now for some random addendums. Apparently, the first year that the goat was up, there was a couple who made love inside of the goat. And that's fucking crazy. Also, the phone call from the narrative hook at the beginning of this video apparently was placed at exactly 12, and that was on New Year's Eve, so I guess that technically that phone call happened in 67 and not 66. Also, apparently Stig was awake and not in his bed, so I got that wrong. Sorry, Stig. Stig has, by the way, unfortunately passed away, or else I would have tried to reach out to him, but yeah. Rest in peace. There's a restaurant close to the goat called Gävlebocken. There's a Swedish drama comedy film from 1990 called Blackjack. That movie takes place in Gävle and famously has a scene where the goat is burned down. So to shoot that, they had to build another goat that year and I guess legally burn that one, with the fire department being there to make sure it's all safe and everything. So technically there was another burning that year, but I don't count it. An artist called Hans Limbus Tjörneryd built and burned his own goat several times. He also started the Goat Burners Society that he, by the way, apparently invited Lawrence Jones... Fuck. That he apparently also invited Lawrence Jones to join, but he didn't. This Limbus character kept popping up throughout my research in a bunch of different contexts, and I actually spoke to his daughter to get a hold of some of the people I talked to for this film, and I just want to give like a quick little mention of him because it didn't fit in anywhere else. Seems like a really cool artist. I recommend looking into him. I actually got this book called Limbus. You probably can't see that. I'll put a photo. And yeah, if you can get a hold of that and you want to read more about that guy, go ahead. And lastly, before we return to the regular scheduled stuff, I just want to read this open letter that an anonymous source sent in to Gävle Dagblad in 1997.
Varje år är det likadant. En massa fjant. Ett vidrigt spektakel som vi Gävlebor tyvärr tvingas bevittna varje år är de bockar som köpmän och andra envisas med att smälla upp i centrala Gävle. Dessa gigantiska halmsjok symboliserar ingenting annat än Satan och ondskan. Om det inte vore straffbart skulle jag personligen bränna ner de äckliga bockarna.
End quote. Och när allt väl sen till slut föll på plats så att säga. Vad blev straffet i slutändan?
Jag blev dömd till grov skadegörelse med villkorlig dom och böter.
Okej, men då så. Då har vi liksom då har jag hela tidslinjen för kvällen där. Vad tycker du om fenomenet med bockbränningarna nu?
Gävle som stad är ju väldigt förknippat med Gävlebocken och jag tror inte så hade varit fallet om den hade fått stå varje jul, utan det finns ju en viss dubbelhet med Gävlebocken att symbolisera den. Det kommer alltid finnas människor som gillar att ligga lite på gränsen. Det är liksom allt från att köra för fort eller att måla på ett tåg eller strunta i säkerhetsbältet, så finns det en personlighetstyp som gillar den här typen av händelser och kickar och tycker att det är liksom att det är kul helt enkelt med lite upptåg och att det händer saker. Då får man ju liksom vara beredd på att ta följderna på det. Det kan ju tyckas idiotiskt och det inte finns någonting att tjäna på det liksom i slutändan, utan det är bara en risk när man väl skulle bli tagen. Ja, för jag kan ju samtidigt ha ju stor förståelse för folk som är emot det och tycker att det är fel att människor tar sig sådana stora friheter med allmänhetens ägodelar, att man tar sig friheten att förstöra någonting. Det kan jag verkligen förstå.
Å andra sidan så det är ju inte ett barnhem som du och de andra brännarna har bränt ner direkt. Det här är ju det går ju verkligen att föra argumentet att den här är byggd för att brinna.
Om man säger så här, om man hade varit orolig på riktigt för en vidare skadegörelse där, då är jag osäker på om man hade satt upp den på den platsen, för den står ju trots allt ganska skyddad till.
Hur ser ditt liv ut idag?
Lever helt vanligt liv, svenssonliv, sambo, jobb. Jag bor i en annan stad i Sverige, men lycklig i livet, inget extraordinärt där, men
jag tar det som att det finns inga planer på en Gävlebocken round 2 för dig.
Nej, jag har övertrasserat det här buskontot nu på ett tag, känner jag, så jag kommer hålla mig lagen till sida helt enkelt.
Precis. In this process of making this little documentary, I had talked to someone very close to the goat, someone who's sworn to protect the goat, and someone who at one point actually took the goat down. So just like it was before I talked to the burner, I didn't quite know where to turn next. But then I stumbled onto this article in Stig Gavléns book that talks about an art exhibition that surrounded the goat in 1999. And that article was written by a man named Björn Widegren. Björn is the former main cultural journalist of the Gävle newspaper Gävlebladet, and I thought that if anyone has kept up with this goat throughout the years, but without having too much of a personal connection to it, at least not in the same intimate way that a builder, a police, or a burner would have, it's gotta be him. So I just had to talk to him. I reached out, he replied and happily obliged and kindly invited me into his home. Här är Sonja.
Jag heter Björn Widegren och jag är före detta kulturredaktör på Gävle Dagblad och har följt bocken i bort 50 år ungefär, kan man säga. det har blivit nu sån enorm uppmärksamhet på att den brinner. Och nu är det kommunen som har hand om det här. Och då blir de så oerhört frustrerade när det brinner. Och de börjar förmänskliga bocken. Så att det är som om det är ett riktigt djur som brinner. Varenda kommunalråd betygar bocken sin aktning på ett väldigt fånigt sätt. De förstår inte att det här är ju en mytisk och symbolisk gestalt. Och jag tycker man ska ha kvar det här med att varför blev den känd? Jo, det var därför att den brann. Inte för att den var en av världens största bockar, för det är det väl knappast nu heller. Ja, det vet jag inte hur det är. Men samtidigt, kittlingen av att det kanske kan brinna, den tror jag fortfarande finns kvar. Fast den inte erkänns. Och jag är den första att säga det att jag uppmanar ingen att bränna bocken. Det är inte det. Då skulle jag ju liksom uppmuntra till brott. Och det vill jag absolut inte göra. Men samtidigt så finns det ju någonting i det hela som gör att det är lite spännande ändå, om den ska brinna eller inte.
Ja, men där tror jag vi står ganska lika. Jag står ganska fast på sidan av att det finns i människan en dragningskraft till vissa företeelser som kanske inte helt moraliskt kan försvaras. Och jag tror att för mig representerar bocken kanske den mest subtila inkörsporten till den sortens känslor. Jag tror att det är svårt att försvara det, men det är också svårt i alla fall för mig att säga att jag inte skulle vilja att bocken brinner ner. Det är inte det jag vill utforska.
Jo, jag tycker också det är oerhört intressant. Och vad vi inte får glömma bort, det är det, varför har bocken blivit så pass känd och så mytisk? Jo, det var därför att den brann så ofta. Jag tror den har brunnit flera gånger än den inte har brunnit faktiskt. När man tittar på hela statistiken. Men klart att den är stor här och att den har fått en väldigt renommé. Och det är ju bara kul att det har blivit så. Det är ett varumärke i Gävle, visst är det så. Men det kom ju sig av att man inte visste ifall den skulle brinna eller inte. Man visste inte förut heller när den hade brunnit. Allt det där. Nu är det ju nya tider och det är ny teknik och världen är lite enformigare än förr kanske. Jag tycker.
Men som jag förstår dig rätt så du tror att man skulle fråga alla Gävlebor huruvida de tycker att bocken ska brinna eller inte, så skulle man inte få en rättvis siffra i och med att det är många som inte kanske rakt ut skulle säga.
Nej, så tror jag det är. Du har helt rätt i det. Så tror jag att det är. Därför att du får inte glömma det att det är många barnfamiljer. Och då barnen tycker den är så jättefin. Och då vill de inte att pappa ska ha sagt offentligt att det är väl bara kul att den brinner. Det vill de inte gärna. Utan det blir en självcensur helt enkelt. Vad de sen säger i goda vänners lag när barnen sover sött och groggarna har tagits fram, det är en helt annan sak.
Vart står ni i den debatten?
Mittemellan.
Mittemellan?
Ja, men jag tycker jag kan förstå båda sidor. Det är väl någonting. Den hade inte haft samma liksom, storhet om den inte hade brunnit å andra sidan. Så att, jag kan förstå båda sidor, men jag kan väl tycka att det är synd att den brinner upp. Så jag står väl mest på den sidan att den får gärna vara kvar.
Och då säger du att du vill att den ska stå. Men det finns ändå någonting i dig som säger att du vill att den ska brinna, låter det ändå som.
Absolut.
Den ska stå.
Och du är tvärsäker?
Ja.
Har vi någon åsikt här? Eller är det...
Vad tycker du, Ida?
Stå!
Du vill att bocken ska stå kvar?
Ja.
Är det för att den är fin eller hur kommer det sig?
För att den är fin. Det tar lång tid att bygga upp den.
För att det tar lång tid att bygga den, ja. Ja, de lägger ner mycket jobb ju. Jag tror att mörkersiffran för de som vill att den ska brinna är större. Det är många som inte riktigt vill erkänna. Men jag tror också att det är många som vill att den ska stå kvar. Men jag ska släppa er vidare. Tack så jättemycket. Trevlig dag. First the dad and he's like, I think it maybe can burn, but also like looks at his wife. I mean, yeah, no, maybe it should stay. And then I take it over to the mom and she's just like, stay, it should live. And he's like, yeah. And then like the kid is like, it should stay. I love that.
Men Sverige är liksom lite... det är lite välordnat och fint och man ska inte säga sådana där saker och man ska inte svära i tv och sådär. Det är lite gamla folkhemmet över det här liksom, att man ska vara, ja, och så ska man vara laglydig och sådär. Ja, det var en ny regementschef tror jag alltså, med överstesgrad ungefär. Då gick han med trupp genom stan och det skulle liksom på något sätt symbolisera det att nu ska vi skydda bocken här med militär. Det är så ganska typiskt också att man försöker på det sättet då slå vakt om bocken och att det ska vara, och så är det nya såna här material som ska byggas av som är flamsäkert och det går inte att sätta eld på det, men det gör det ju ändå. Och det är liksom lite komiskt också. Det är en sorts ödets ironi att det har ju aldrig riktigt fungerat. Jag kan säga, om jag ska vara lite orolig för utvecklingen med bocken, det är att kommunen tar på sig sånt enormt ansvar för att den måste få vara, citat, helig på något sätt. Va? Det får man får liksom inte göra det därför att det här är det viktigaste som vi har i Gävle. Näst Brynäs då förstås. Och jag tror att den blir mindre och mindre känd för varje år som den står kvar och för varje år som det står någon sån här kommunrepresentant och säger att det är så härligt att bocken har fått leva i år. Oj, vad fint. Vi hoppas att den ska få göra det så att det inte blir sorg och gråt istället för glädje och fin gemenskap. De är så experter på att tala om det här utan att de kan fixa den här glädjen och gemenskapen ändå. Utan det är mer som retorik. Och den där retoriken tycker jag är lite jobbig, lite töntig.
Jag pratade med Leif Becker, före detta byggare av bocken.
Okej.
Han är ju en väldigt omvänd ståndpunkt då från hur jag uppfattade det. Och jag tror att han kände väl även någon form av, som jag uppfattade det i alla fall, liksom att det nästan var personligt när den väl gick upp i rök så att säga. Kan du liksom förstå ståndpunkten?
Det kan jag. Det kan jag naturligtvis göra och de har byggt den och lagt ner en massa arbetstimmar på den och allting och sånt och så går den och brinner och så är det någon som har varit påstruken som ofta har bränt ner den och det är väl inget roligt. Nej, det är inte roligt, det förstår jag också. Men samtidigt så ja, allt man gör rivs ju alltid ner ändå på något sätt. Men visst förstår jag det. Man kan ju inte lämna känslorna bakom. Nej, det tycker jag inte man ska göra. Men det blir så förnumstigt på något sätt. För det förstår man ju att det är ju inte roligt alls. Va? Men det här är ju också såna saker som ja, det här med att man tycker att det är lite spännande vad som händer. Se ifall den klarar sig i år eller inte. Ja, det kanske inte är det finaste som människan kan visa upp, men när är det då? Alltså, då börjar man ju tänka sig att vi måste ha ett perfekt samhälle där allting är fint och bra och där ingen gör fel, så måste det vara. Jag brukar säga det att de som tror att man kan sträva efter det perfekta, då är man nog på väg riktigt till det icke-perfekta.
Ja, väldigt bra sagt tycker jag. Talking to Björn was freeing. He struck me as a creative soul, and despite our age difference and the fact that we approached the creative process from complete opposite angles, him being a writer first and foremost and me considering my writing to be perhaps the weakest part of my skill set, I felt a sort of kinship with him. And as you might expect, that notion was reinforced once he started opening up about his stance on the goat. Baby, leave your brother alone. Who knows how long he'll be with us? Björn had mastered the art of not going so hard in one direction that you run the risk of coming off as an obstinate contrarian looking to provoke, while still standing by your genuine opinion and maintaining a level of punk. I went into this project knowing that my stance would be somewhat biased, but I had an earnest intention of trying to tell the story from a neutral standpoint, to the best of my ability at least. What I probably don't need to tell you, seeing how you've sat through this video all the way up until this point, is that the longer the project went on, the more I realized that I most likely wouldn't be able to do that. I simply don't think I was born to tell objective truths. First of all, I don't think I'm intelligent enough to interpret complex phenomena with any sort of impartiality. And that's likely due to that, second of all, I'm fundamentally driven by emotions. I'm continually impressed by rational people. Those sort of people who are able to form their opinions like 100% unaffected by outside stimuli, general opinions, and their own feelings. These are the sort of people that go on to become good scientists, journalists, and for some reason never politicians. I still do not defend the burning of the goat, I think. But at the very core of my person lives a will for the goat to burn. And honestly, like, who am I if I don't allow myself that feeling? And bearing these facts in mind, me being an emotionally driven person and not a great writer, I started to question myself at this point. Since when am I a person who also worries about disagreeing with someone? I've never been afraid of conflicts or presenting a controversial take if it's something that I genuinely believe. Like, what do I, or you, the viewer for that matter, gain by me emotionally stifling what I feel in search of, what, journalistic integrity? Something that I've never previously cared about, but for some reason convinced myself would be necessary for this specific project? No. No! To hell with journalistic integrity! I'm done pretending. Look, I'm wearing this shirt of the goat burning saying on fire since 1966, and I'm wearing it proudly. And I get that these words might come off as just mere platitudes, but let me attempt to drive the point home with this. I have, over the last however many years, pondered the question that all pro-burners at some point has pondered, namely, if I were to burn the goat, how would I go about it? And this is probably the last time I mention this in the video, but it bears repeating, I neither encourage nor urge anyone to commit a crime. This following segment of the video is 100% hypothetical and nothing that anyone should take with any sort of seriosity. If you do, you're an idiot. Now, with that out of the way, I think I'm gonna try to prove or perhaps conjure into reality my newfound relaxed attitude to objectivity and impartiality, so here is... Well, if it isn't the one place in my apartment where I haven't filmed yet. I'd start off by going to Facebook Marketplace where I would make a fake account under a fake name. I would also likely use some sort of VPN service to change my IP. Wouldn't this be a great place for an ad read? Well, neither NordVPN, nor Surfshark, nor any other company in the fucking world wants to sponsor this channel, so it isn't an ad spot, it's just me standing silently over there waiting for this version of me to stop talking. Specifically, I would be browsing around for drones, and eventually I would get a hold of 2 identical drones from 2 different sellers. I'd meet up with these sellers in real life, paying with cash and altering the way I look when I meet them. I would wait until Christmas is over and then I would drive to Gävle. Specifically, I would go there on New Year's Eve. I would drive up somewhere close around the goat and I would get out of my car. I would get one of my drones out and I would fly it up in the air, filming the fireworks. I'd do this for a couple of hours most likely, and then I would get back into my car and drive back home. And now you're probably thinking, wait Jeff, what about the goat you were supposed to burn? But hold on, we're getting there. So I would get back home and I would go back onto Facebook Marketplace. Now this time I would be looking for a Raspberry Pi. Once that's been acquired, I would have to learn some code and stuff, but fast forwarding 1 year, I would be going back to Gävle, specifically on New Year's Eve. I would arrive in Gävle with my 2 drones. Now bear with me as I get a little bit technical. On one of the drones, I would attach the previously mentioned Raspberry Pi. Now this Raspberry Pi would contain code that triggers a little piston, and that piston clicks. One of those, I don't know, in Swedish we call them storm lighters, the sort of lighters that go off regardless of weather. Now hanging under that lighter in some sort of little contraption, but for simplicity's sake here I've just did it as a little water balloon, would be a container of gasoline. Now you can probably see where I'm going with this, but I would take my unmodified drone and hide it back in my car. I would then take my modified drone and fly it all the way to the goat. I would land it on the back of the goat where it would ignite the goat, but also itself, thereby burning the evidence. And I know what you're thinking, isn't it a bit conspicuous that a guy is just hanging around with a drone controller at the same time that people see a drone land on the goat and set it on fire? And to that I have 2 things to say. First of all, I would be hiding in plain sight. I wouldn't be acting fishy, I wouldn't be standing standing in like a bush, I would be standing very openly. Second of all, the moment that the modified drone lands on the goat, I would pull out my unmodified drone, fly it up in the air, and then land it again at my feet. Now, inside of this unmodified drone would be an SD card containing footage from New Year's last year. Footage which I, by the way, have changed the metadata on so that it looks like it was filmed today, and also footage that will be severely underexposed to the point where you can't really make out what sort of weather it is or even exactly what you're seeing except for fireworks. So if/when the police show up to question me about my drone, saying something along the lines of
Jaha, hur var det här då? Jag ser att du kör runt med en sån här drönare. Har du hört att bocken har brunnit upp av en drönare?
something like that, I would say something along the lines of ja, jag såg att den brann. Jag har min drönare precis här och ni får jättegärna titta igenom minneskortet om ni vill. Jag såg att det var en annan drönare som var uppe och flög där, så jag satte ner min lite tidigare för jag var rädd att de skulle krocka i luften. The police are then allowed to take my drone if they want, look through the memory card, look through the metadata, and eventually they'd say something like
ja, beklagar strulet, men du vet hur det är med den här bocken varje år.
And I'd say something along the lines of ja, det är för jävligt att de inte bara kan lämna den i fred.
Ja, verkligen. Ja, ursäkta strulet, ha en fortsatt trevlig kväll.
Ingen orsak, konstapeln. Ha en fortsatt trevlig kväll. Jag hoppas ni sätter dit svinet som brände bocken. The cop would then leave me alone, and I'd take my drone and go home scot-free. And that's how I would burn the goat and get away with it. Obviously, it's not a bulletproof plan, but I think that it's good enough and that it would work. But to make sure, I ran it by a test audience. Jag har en liten hypotes. Så här skulle jag ha bränt bocken.
Okej.
Hur jag skulle ha bränt bocken och kommit undan med det. Online så hade jag köpt 2 stycken drönare. Skulle börja med att ta ut pengar i cash. Landa på bocken, den självantänder, den bränner även upp sig själv då. Alltså det vill säga bevismaterialet. Så den smälter ju fullständigt. Och det är där den då andra drönaren kommer in. Med det man spelade in året innan. Jag har ju min drönare här. Och ni kan titta på minneskortet. Jag har bara filmat fyrverkerier. Och det är min strategi för hur jag skulle ha bränt bocken. Och där bollar jag över till dig. Vad tror du om tesen? Har du några tankar?
Ja, nej, men tanken där med alibi, det tyckte jag var riktigt smart. Några kritiska punkter där är ju att det är samma typ av väder eller samma typ av snötäcke och sånt där. Att det matchar från de båda datumen.
Just det.
Ja, man kan säga så här. Det är ju en tanke så god som en annan, kan man säga. Att det närmar sig det här objektet med en civilt ganska trivial produkt egentligen.
Teorin i övrigt annars, den har jag fått presenterad utav många bekanta. Och det har ofta stannat på själva antändningstekniken då helt enkelt. Hur passrimligt det är att kunna modda en drönare till någon slags nästan Robot Wars inspirerad teknik då.
Vid det här tillfället när du ska angripa bocken, då har du ju preparerat en före och så kommer ju folk, det är ju så pass mycket rörelse där. Man gör ju jämförelser, vilken typ av fyrverkerier hade man det året när du filmade och vilka fyrverkerier presenterar du på minneskortet. Men
generellt sett så har jag gått och väntat på drönarattack och har känt att det är ju det liksom givna nästa steget med den tekniska utvecklingen så att säga.
Det vet jag med brott att på något ställe gör man alltid det lilla misstaget.
Ja.
Sen gäller det bara att avslöja det.
När man är en liten hobbyingenjör då är det nästan möjligt. Så absolut.
Men då tackar jag så jättemycket. Det låter ju på dig som att det här är en bra idé.
Ja.
Ja, eller så här, det låter som att det är en idé som hade funkat.
Det är en idé som definitivt hade funkat, så kan jag säga.
Ja, det låter bra. Varken du eller jag uppmanar till någon form av brott.
Precis.
Mycket bra. Both Sven-Olof and the burner loved my idea. And I walked out of the conversation feeling like I had finally released something that had waited a long time to get out of my system. And in doing so, I think I've finally come to a point where I can confidently share what is probably my final thoughts on the goat, on Christmas, on Björn, Leif, the burner, on me. Gävlebocken is, in the grand scheme of things, a pretty insignificant phenomenon. It concerns a very specific group of people, mostly confined to a specific city located in a specific and admittedly pretty small country. It stirs up specific emotions and, for some, specific impulses. But it also has the ability to stir up more abstract internal debates. Debates about what is okay to say, what is okay to feel. Given the space it requires, these are questions that can potentially illuminate sides of your inner life that you previously didn't know existed. If you're lucky, you'll learn something about yourself, and if you're unlucky, you'll learn something about yourself that you wish you didn't. Personally, I've gone from an aspiring neutral to cautiously self-questioning to, yeah, where am I now? What am I now? I think it's okay to hold a conviction on something while still maintaining the openness to budge on it if/when new information, new insights, or just new feelings present themselves. That isn't a sign of weak character. That's a sign that you're prepared to adapt to the truth, regardless of whether or not that truth is in line with what you yourself fundamentally feel that you represent. It also means that you're open to the fact that there might not be an objective truth. Rarely are things just black or white, and that at some point, to make up your mind, you might just have to fall back on what feels right in your heart. And perhaps that is a kind of journalistic integrity after all.
Jag har alltid varit öppen för diskussion. Jag tycker man ska diskutera mycket mer än vad man gör. Man kan inte lutas mot en allmän opinion. Man måste skaffa sig någonting eget att tycka. Och man ska vara inifrån styrd, har jag tyckt. För etablissemanget håller alltid upp ett slickat pekfinger och så känner de, vart blåser vinden nu? Jaha, den blåser från vänster här nu. Ja, då är vi det. Då ska vi vara sådana. Oj, då blåser den från höger. Ja, då ska vi vara där. Skaffa en egen åsikt. Och när jag skrev, det gjorde ingenting om inte folk tyckte som jag skrev, vilket många inte gjorde. De gillade inte vad jag skrev och det hade inte jag någonting emot. Det var inte för att övertyga dem jag skrev, utan det var för att övertyga dem om vad jag tyckte. Det var det enda jag ville nå ut med. Och när jag nådde ut med det så var jag nöjd med det. Faran är ju när alla springer i det här samma loppet och åt samma håll. Och det finns inte någon alternativ åsikt. Då blir jag rädd. Alltså. Och lite så tycker jag man ska komma ihåg när man resonerar kring bocken. Så var inte rädd för att du inte tycker precis som de i kommunledningen tycker eller något sånt där. Bilda din egen uppfattning.
And Björn's right. I don't need anyone to agree with me. I don't need to convince you that my stance is the correct one. All I should really do is convince you of what my stance is, something that I, throughout this video, have had a lot of trouble doing. So allow me to try to shout it from the rooftops once and for all. Bocken måste brinna. In short, Gävle City needs to stop making the burning of the goat such a complicated and shameful experience. However, you'd be excused for now assuming that I want the fence to be removed, the guards to be fired, and the webcam to be taken down. You may also assume that I want the pro-goaters or anti-burners to chill out or learn how to have a good time, but that's where you're wrong. I don't want either of those things. Sure, I wouldn't be opposed to dialing it back a little bit, perhaps going from double to single fence, full HD webcam to 240p and 24/7 security guards to occasional volunteers, but to fully remove those things would be to remove what makes this tradition what it is. For you see, the pro-goaters, the haysayers, the anti-burners, the dull and boring, are in fact a vital part of this whole package. These people fill perhaps the most crucial role of all, even more so than the burners, I think. These people must stand their ground in the face of the burners, representing the necessary objections that make the burning of the goat what it is. For what are the goat burnings if not a rebellion? And what is a rebellion when there's nothing to rebel against? What is counterculture without culture, punk without Vivaldi? It is of utmost importance that the burning of the goat remains a quest worthy of only the bravest, dumbest, drunkest, and uncompromising of heroes. The burning of the goat can never be allowed to be legalized, normalized, marketed, or made accessible. It must remain what it's always been. It must be burned with the knowledge of the risks. It must be burned through climbing a fence, controlling a drone, or while brandishing a bow and arrow. It must be burned by the hands of an unlikely hero, not in cape and spandex, but with an idea and a bic lighter. It must be burned for the honor, the glory, the fame, or at least just to satiate the urge of seeing it go up in flames. It must be burned for the children. It must be burned for the elderly. It must be burned for the people, for the tradition, for Christmas, for Sweden, for me. It must be burned. Thank you for watching. Oh, here's the head. And if that's the only time it burns this year, you're welcome. That's all, folks. Yeah, we can cut there.